Hi, thank you so much, Carolee. So I'm Jace.
And I'm Fanny. Welcome to Freelance Exchange, speak to a freelancer about freelancing and the gig economy.
Now, usually we speak to a freelancer, but today we are actually stepping out of that little bit and we had a very special guest today.
Okay, TEDx speaker and CEO and founder of Jobatica, we have the exquisite opportunity of having Carolee Hendricks down with us here in Singapore and in our recording studio today.
Hi, Carolee.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. Singapore is almost like my second home already.
We hope to see you more often, actually.
You will.
Right. Maybe for a start, would you like to share with us a bit about yourself and also about the company so that our audiences can understand a bit more about you?
So maybe firstly then about Jobatica. So Jobatica is basically a community of ready to relocate tech and business and creative talent. Basically everybody from the talent side who joins Jobatica joins because they want to work in another country. And from the other hand, we connect them to the enterprises, organizations around the world. Right now we work with organizations across 49 countries who are lacking certain skills locally or would just like to bring culture add to their teams. So this is what the platform does. But shortly about myself, I actually became an entrepreneur when I was 16 from a student project. From a student company, grew out my first company. I became the youngest inventor in my country. It was a very inspiring experience, realizing that as a 16-year-old, you can invent something that will change people's lives. And you don't have to have a PhD to do that you can be a simple girl. So from there, like I have said, that I got addicted to making a difference and I couldn't let go. So I have been being an entrepreneur since high school. So that's my...
Singapore only started the drive into entrepreneurship, I would say, only about less than 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
But till now, we still have a struggle in terms of getting people to think outside the box, right? A lot of the parents would tell their kids, no, I want you to be a doctor, I want you to be a lawyer, or I want you to join a bank. So is that the kind of environments that you see, from where you're coming from?
So I think where I come from, first of all, I come from Estonia, which is a tiny country. I call it the Singapore of Europe. It's it's today the most digitally advanced country in the world, and a lot of entrepreneurship. To be honest, when I started, thinking back, this was a country which in 1991 regained its independence from Soviet Union, which occupied the country for 50 years. And every person in the country had to start with basically 15 Singapore dollars. That's what everybody got, not more. So that's how you had to build your life. So I think the fact that people had to build their lives from that and the country had to be rebuilt from that made people very entrepreneurial because you need to be entrepreneurial to figure out how to come out from that. And I have also looked back, my conversation, even you were mentioning like parents saying that you should be a lawyer. I had this moment with my father where I came home and I told that I have this idea. And he told me that it's such a good idea, go to the patent office. I didn't know what a patent office is, but I didn't Google, but I found from the yellow pages and I went there. But I have wondered if my father would have told me, forget about it, go and study, become a doctor, would I ever be here? So I think it's very important what we actually say and how we encourage young people in that very vulnerable time. So for me, I was lucky that my father really kind of gave me the confidence and that really changed my life.
Right. So essentially, so if let's say we were to take a step back, going back to Jobatica, so essentially Jobatica looks at matching people with the right skill sets to the right team, right, or the right jobs. So it's kind of very much similar in the form of like freelancing, freelancers, where currently in the country in Singapore is just starting to actually kind of take off. Gain traction in that sense with the Singapore government coming in to acknowledge, right, this group of specialized talent, so just a bit about why do you decided to set up this platform? I mean, what is the motivation behind this?
Yeah, my motivation or the idea actually came from a few things. So first of all, I was before Sabbatical, I had been actually in media business. I had led the launch of 7 television channels in the Baltics, like MTV, National Geographic channels, Fox Entertainment channels. And I was there for 7 years and starting pretty young, but learning fast quite a bit. And I kind of at one point felt a little bit bored. I felt that this sitting here only in the Baltic region, doing the same faces, that I would love to take myself out to a different cultural environment, maybe learn, take the knowledge that I have and help an earlier stage company to build up a media channel, for example. Right. And I realized that nobody's actually using that group of people who has already been in the workforce. There's a lot for interns, which is great as well. Yeah. But interns come out from school, they don't have the experience, but the knowledge actually comes with people who already are in the workforce. So that was one realization. Then I was also lucky then I call it my own sabbatical. I was lucky to get to Singularity University, which is like a think tank in Silicon Valley in NASA Ames. So I was there for 3 months. And I remember there was a moment actually where I had the sabbatical idea, and I was running in the morning. Every morning I went running and I passed the Google campus, and you see the power of kind of this house has changed the whole world, right? So I was kind of wondering, why are those kind of companies emerging from here, not anywhere else? It's not like everybody in Silicon Valley woke up and were smarter than anybody else on the planet, right? So it cannot be the case. It cannot be the food that they eat. It should be something else. And I realized it's the kind of the knowledge or knowledgeable people who are drawn there. So I started to wonder, coming from a small country myself, how could we draw the knowledgeable people to the locations that they might not consider as obvious career choices? So how could they want to move to Estonia or Singapore or Denmark instead of Silicon Valley and kind of discover how it is to live a local life in a local team while contributing with their skills and knowledge. So basically that's what we started to do. So the idea around sabbatical started from my thought of that the change actually happens when you distribute knowledge. We can bring as much money to a community as we want, but if they don't have the knowledge what to do with that money, nothing will change. So it all starts with the people and the knowledge. So that was kind of the original background of the inspiration.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, I think that is like freelancing 2.0. When you bring it across a global platform.
But I think that's where it will be, because right now, actually, we are living in the, now I'm quoting my TED talk, but we are living in the era of highest human mobility in the recorded history. So basically, people have never moved as much as they are right now. And I think it totally makes sense, because if you think how we are connected today versus 20 years ago, like 20 years ago, our connections were nearby. They were around where we hanged out. And maybe you traveled and then you had a friend, but then you forgot about a friend unless you were, persistent enough to write emails or send letters. But now we are so connected through the network. So my friends in Singapore or Australia or Japan are much more like me than most of people in Estonia, because we are more connected about the like-mindedness rather than what is our nationality, right? Which means that we are also much more comfortable about the world, which means that we can much more easily move around. And I think that's something that countries will have to start really consider. I think countries in very many ways, not the most innovative ones, they are, I think, ahead. But like if you think about what's going on in the United States right now, I think countries still have the illusion that they will decide where people go. But now people are starting to decide where they go. And that will make the difference of the future of the country, right?
Yeah. So I must say, you are very forward-thinking, right? Especially this whole talent mobility thing. But what are some of the challenges that you face when you first, set up Sabbatical and trying to get it up and running?
Challenges. I mean, definitely policy is a challenge because, we cannot, for example, Sabbatical we work with the U.S. companies only who work who hire remote people because I mean immigration in the United States is ridiculously difficult, right? So policies or the framework set by the governments are can support or not support us. So policy definitely is, and then for us definitely something that we are really kind of passionate about changing, and in some countries we have already managed to get there, is the fact that does it really matter what your passport is? Like if you think about if you are a UX designer, does it matter if you were born in Pakistan or in Germany if you're a great UX designer? So the question is, we're still defining people by the statistical error, which was where they accidentally were born. And actually, passport is something that has existed only 100 years. So it's a very recent innovation, but does it already make sense if you think about today's world? So I think today when we're working, we talk about, for example, Estonian government, then there we have managed to help the government, and we're in constant dialogue to, I mean, you can get a work permit within 24 hours with less than $200. It's now we're talking about digital nomad visa, which I'm happy to cover later on. So I think, and this is a government who has acknowledged that if we don't get the people, then who will build the economy? So they are doing everything to adapt to the modern world. And I think Singapore is very similar in the mindset, right? So I think our challenge and opportunity is how fast the countries will adapt to the changing workforce.
Yeah.
So is that one of the reasons that brought you to Singapore?
Yes. So here in Singapore, we just hired our first Singaporean. We have set up the office for the region, and we are hiring the second Singaporean. So we are establishing our second official operational office. So our headquarters is in Tallinn, Estonia, where we have people now. I think it's 42 people from 19 nationalities. Who have, or they all came through Sabbatical, or most of them came through Sabbatical, and they flew in to build our vision. So I think that's really inspiring. And I think that's where the world will be. Like your career shouldn't be defined by where you accidentally were born and live, but maybe the best team is, you have to circle the world and then get there.
I think for us at Creative at Works, that's something that we have also been driving, especially to our client, right? So it doesn't matter whether, the talent is your full-time staff or is an independent so-called vendor or individual freelancers, so long as it's what made a great team, right? And the right skill sets, the right mindset is the most important. But I'm just wondering, because you mentioned you have 42 people in Estonia from 90 over countries. How do you manage the cultural diversities, among this group of people? Do you have any...
Or even language challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
We basically, we hired our first person in 2015 who was from Argentina. So he moved from Argentina to Estonia. So we kind of started from the scratch by being culturally diverse. So we decided English is our main language. I think and this is where something that we're also advocating very much to the companies that we're working with. There's this kind of, if I think back about every conversation I have had with HR people, and they say to me that we only hire culture fit, then I would like to challenge that. If you hire culture fit, you usually hire people who are just like you. And if you hire people who are just like you, it's really great to find agreeable people, but does that take your business further? So I think for us, I see how the cultural difference has actually brought, different ways of looking at things, and has challenged me so many times. And the challenge actually helps us to get further. Of course, there are little things where, you have Americans who are much more maybe,
outspoken.
Then you have somebody from Egypt who is maybe a little and then you try to find but you end up finding that both sides learn something new, and then they work happily together. But this is, I think, part of the culture add, that you on one hand bring something new, but also every counterpart will take away something new, right? So
I think that is very important, especially, in Singapore, we are talking about 4 different races, right? So we have the Chinese, the Malay, the Indians,
And then
then the
Eurasians.
Eurasians. So for us, it's very important that we live harmony together. In fact, that is actually one of the, I would say, main reasons why Singapore, can convert ourselves from a third world country to a first world country within 50 years. So I think that is actually
that's a very good
important.
point, and I think that's something that I really admire about Singapore.
Thank you, thank you.
Every time I land in Changi Airport or at Changi Airport, I have this feeling like this is like this diverse. I mean, you see all types of people, and this is so good. I think that's something I sometimes miss in Northern Europe. It's still not there yet.
Yeah,
But I think
yeah.
there's one thing with Singaporean. I mean, the youths are starting to open up and then to embrace, traveling, things like that. But there are still a big majority of us who are still a bit conservative in, having the digital nomad kind of lifestyle. So can you share with us some of the advantages of adopting,
So I can start from the fact that I think that also is why I had the idea of Jobatical, is that when I was 17, I actually fulfilled my first big dream, which was I spent a year as an exchange student in the United States. And if I think back about this year, you're 17 and you are alone in I think it was 5,000 miles from home. That completely changed me in the way that you suddenly, I think what it does to you is that, first of all, it just opens your eyes about, things that you think are black, and then suddenly you understand there are so many more colors. You think that things, you have had mindset of things, and then you have to adapt to a different mindset. You become much more humble, but also there's a lot of studies around how this enhances your creativity. So basically being able to, having lived in different cultures, it means that you can start to make new type of connections. And that basically, there's such a creativity boost that comes from living between different cultural. And that's not like if you travel for 2 weeks and, are in the tourist area resort and get your pina colada, that's not where you get the cultural, different kind of thing. But really embracing the local, being part of something like that is completely out of your comfort zone, that will create basically a new way of looking at things, and that will help to make you actually more creative. So that's something that we see also more and more, that recruiters are looking for international experience, which means that this will become your advantage when you are building your career as a freelancer or as an employee. But regarding freelancers, I think one of the things that we see is that a lot of freelancers use us. Even in our own team, we have freelancers who are now hired full time because they. But one of the reasons for that is that for international career right now, there's no way to legally be employed as a freelancer if you unless you live in your home country. So if you live outside your home country, what we talked about digital nomads, then which is, according to some statistics, already millions of people who are living like that, right? What they do today, or because they don't have any options, is that they usually enter the country with a tourist visa and then live there, then leave for some time and then come back, because there's no other way. Because right now, legally, you can be employed by a local employer or your spouse lives or works there. But there's no way for you to enter a country and work as a freelancer. What it in reality actually means is that, let's say that there's an organization, let's say it's IBM, who, and I think IBM has quite a bit of flexible work already, right? So let's say IBM says that it's okay for you to go and travel, work remotely, work from ever. Now the person goes to a country, let's say it's Singapore, and works from Singapore. Then as soon as he or she opens the computer, they are actually working illegally. But they have no other way to do that. So that was something that we started to notice. And that's why when it was, I think, first time in 2016 in December when I had a chat with the Estonian president, and I mentioned that have you ever thought about the workforce that doesn't have any kind of policy support? And now this year, after several discussions around this topic, the Estonian Interior Ministry turned to us to help to figure out the digital nomad visa. So their plan is to get it launched, or how do you say in environmental, basically make it effective from the beginning of next year. And basically that would, they're still putting, or we are together putting together the criteria, but the idea of that is that basically you can be freelancer, contractor, servicing different kinds of clients.
Right.
You can be an entrepreneur who has a small agency and servicing different and working as a freelancer. Location independent. So, for example, if you're a constructor, it's very hard to be location independent. Unless, like my colleague said, you have very long hands. Or the other criteria is you are an employee of a organization in another country. So let's say the IBM case, you're working for IBM, you can apply for the digital nomad visa. You have to have a proof of like monthly income, and we actually are putting that criteria together after asking the community. So we did a survey on the digital nomad community, asking their opinion, what the criteria should be and what their problems are. So, but basically, then the visa will be initially 1 year. And the goal for Estonia is that those people would actually want to stay there and make them very easy transition if they want to stay there later to get either work permit or to extend the digital nomad visa. But that visa would also give an access to Schengen, but with a limitation of 90 days then.
Right.
So it means that you can travel around 90 days, but you can, the rest of the time you have to be in the country.
Right.
That's interesting.
But and this would be then the first country who will recognize that there is a workforce that is working in a new ways and that will create a legal way. So you don't have to shiver every time you go through the immigration that will I get in this time or will I not get in this time? And I think, for our, what we hope with this, why we're really keen helping Estonia with that is that other countries will start to follow because I think it's ridiculous that we are not acknowledging a group of, and everybody's talking about it, but we have no policy acknowledging that group of people.
Yeah. So other than Estonia government, which other governments are you also talking to with regards to this digital nomad visa?
Definitely we have already had a conversation around that with Singapore. We have
How's the reception?
we have shared the Estonian example. Also, Malaysian government is doing something interesting in that.
Okay.
Regarding digital nomad visa, I can say we have talked about immigration topics. I have talked to many governments across Europe, but regarding digital nomad visa, we haven't had that much conversations just yet because it's not still. As soon as it will go live, we will showcase it, and this will be. And it has got a huge media coverage already from United States to Europe to Japan. There's a lot of talk and questions we are getting about it, from Japanese freelance community, for example.
Okay. Well, I think that would be interesting because I think Japan all along has been quite I would say inclusive. Very. Yeah. So it would be good if, let's say, we start to see more movements.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To Japan, yeah.
We actually had it was very funny because when we had the first digital nomad visa meeting, it took place at the Estonian headquarters, right? So Sabbatical office. So we had Estonian Interior Ministry, Estonian Ministry of Economic Affairs, Estonian Police and Border Guard, Sabbatical, e-residency team. I don't know if you know them, but the e-residency is another great innovation we can talk about separately. A digital citizenship of Estonia. And also remotely, we had Remote Year and different platforms. So we had a government meeting with people sitting in Kuala Lumpur, Bali, Tallinn, Vilnius. And I was thinking that this is such a great example of where we should go. Like it's not like you have a government policy meeting in a small kind of office and everybody sitting there, but you have remote people, people thinking with you who are not even part of your country. So I think that was a very inspiring meeting.
Yeah.
We have so much to learn from. Really.
Do you think everybody should give it a try then? To actually take 1 year sabbatical off where they're doing and just go to a country that they want to
uproot themselves.
Yeah.
I think everybody should. So is it 1 year or is it 3 years? So I think it's more about getting out from your comfort zone. I think it's. I really like there's a saying that the thing that can teach you most in your professional life is taking yourself into as many uncomfortable situations as possible. So going abroad is not something that will be only lollipops and butterflies, right? But it's so exciting if you embrace it. And this will change the way you think. And I think if we think about what's going on right now in the world, again, looking at the United States of America, for example, or Brexit, I don't think those things would be possible if all people would have lived in another culture.
Yeah.
Because, and this is very much like the cultural difference, which is actually just a fear about the difference, because you don't have experience with a different. So if you are somebody who has a friend who is Muslim, you can never say that all Muslims are bad. But if you have no idea what it actually means, then you're kind of locked in your small world. So I think everybody should live in another country. And I think we will go to the era where we have much more courage and support to do that.
But there's also a lot of challenges for an individual to just go over to a country that they're not familiar with and then start looking for jobs.
Speaking as a Singaporean.
Because
There's a lot of fears.
That's why we have Jobatical, like we find the jobs, right? So you find the job already.
But how about the, what are some of the challenges, or rather I would say, what are the advice that you give to an individual before they even start? You know? What are some
Is
of the,
there any prep work?
do they have to prepare
emotionally?
themselves?
I think the biggest, maybe in that sense, you need to find a job, and we're trying to help with that. We can try, we are also kind of, possibly if it's needed, we can help with immigration. We have immigration support actually in over 40 countries.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing, what I have seen when things go wrong is when the person goes to another country but expects to see home. So, like if you go to another country and expect to see the food that you ate at home, expect to see everything being the same, and we have seen that. Luckily, very few, but this is where the frustration. So basically, when you go to another country, you have to open your mind and kind of realize, I'm not going home right now. I'm going to another country, which means the food will be different, and you will enjoy it because it is different, and that's the part of the experience, right? So I think kind of the first step is understanding that it will be a different country, not your home.
Right.
And I think from there, just and that's actually a good question, something that we are starting to do more and more on the platform. We haven't been doing that much yet, but how to kind of really prepare you for the interviews, because there are also interview cultural differences and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what my team is working on. So it's a very good question, how to be more prepared, let's say what the European different countries, let's say what the German recruiter is expecting from you and yada yada. But I think the main big thing is your own preparation, which means that your mindset has to be ready for a change. And another thing is that when you're kind of introducing yourself, you have to really think through that for that recruiter whom you are now going to be communicating, it's not, so basically they need a little bit more introduction than somebody who might work, in the next building to you. So really thinking about their aspect of it, like how they kind of, if you would have somebody from, let's say, Estonia wanting to join your team, like how would you like them to introduce themselves to you? So really thinking through how you actually build that bridge. But I think the mindset is the biggest.
So then my next question is, then that's on an individual side, but how about like company like ourselves, if let's say we want to open up to get, people of another culture to join us, what are some of the preparation that we need to get ready to, in order for the experience to be rewarding for both of us from a company perspective?
From my first question is, would it be your first international person, somebody coming from overseas? So I think the first, yes. So I think the first thing is that basically, the first thing would be that thinking really from the first, let's say, lunch that you have together, to really start building things that will make that person included. Because they don't know the cultural environment there, so you have to introduce. So there has to be. So what we recommend usually is to have somebody in the team assigned as a buddy. So basically somebody who would be like your go-to person when they have a question that you didn't even know that it is a question. Where do you buy something, you just go and buy it, but they have no idea where to even start looking. In Singapore, it's easier. Like if you go to a country where you don't have even the signs, or you cannot read it. So, but in Singapore, it's a little bit easier.
Right.
But just what we would recommend first is to have somebody who's assigned like let's say the first 2 months, a buddy. Somebody you can go and trust. Even if you want to go to a doctor, you can just go and ask, what do you recommend, so that they would feel safe, because they might not go to CEO, and I think you don't want with that question get to you as well. So that would be first thing, and the other to really maybe design the first week, like what is, the first welcome lunch together, explaining a little bit, that's how we work. That's how when we have lunches, those are the things that we're talking about. Because I remember we had a case where an European actually joined the Singapore company, and he had really hard time understanding. Like, for example, there was an issue with understanding how important the team lunches were. So he liked to code when they had lunch. And then he had suddenly discovered that he was so excluded, and he didn't realize that it was because those lunches were when important things were discussed. He just thought that, they are going out for lunch. So really maybe making it clear, like to a 4-year-old, how you work and what your expectations are in the kind of just in the social environment. And then assign a buddy. I think that would be like 2 things.
So what are some of the most common, I would say, position that you see that's opening up to international talent like this?
Engineering definitely is. Engineering is so, and there, it could be from Ruby or to. Everybody's looking for artificial intelligence or machine learning experts, right? So, but also from our end, what we see is a lot of like UX designers, like I said, senior front end, senior front end people, senior designers overall, and also marketing, but senior level marketing. So we have quite a bit of success with placing marketing positions both in Europe and Asia.
Wow. Okay.
Right. Okay, before we let you go.
No, I have another question. This is a very common question, but I just wanted to hear it from you. What do you think is the future of work going to look like?
Future of work. I think this is a very wide question. I don't think it has one answer, but I do think that in that sense, I'm very much an optimist, and I do think that one change that automation, for example, will change, and is already changing actually, is that automation will give us much more time to use the creative power that we actually came here with. So if there's somebody's doing that job, right, then you actually can step back and use what you have here. And I think people will be very important part of like next to automation. We are the creators of like our minds will have much more freedom to create. I think the big question there is how do we distribute the wealth and how that will happen, all the, basic salary discussions and so on. But I do think that people will have much more ways to use the power that we actually came here with. But what is the future of work? I think if we talk about talent mobility, I think what the countries, which I a little bit mentioned before, but I think the countries will start to understand that talent will decide the success and failures of economies, and which means that countries will have to redefine how they operate. So it's not anymore that I sit with those people. Singapore has seen it already for years. That has been part of your success. But in most countries, you kind of have been sitting with this group of people that we decided that has this passport, and now they sit here. But now they don't sit here anymore. And the question is that how do you become like a service? How do you attract the best people? So I think the future work in that sense will be much more global, and people will be, so attracting people will be like a big thing what the countries will have to start focusing. And that means also again, we were talking about user experience. I think the countries will definitely have to start thinking about the user experience of a country, because if you create barriers, I mean, like you look at America right now, we have seen the decline of like international interest, even to go and travel there. Not talking about studying, which has dropped enormously. So if you create barriers or fear, that will mean that people don't want to come here, so they will go somewhere else. So you have to really start thinking about the user experience. And I've said once that I believe that in the future the governments will have the minister of user experience, like somebody who actually is in charge of thinking about that, because it's such an important thing. I mean, in Estonia, like for example, we have talked about my country a bit, but it's this country has amazing user experience, because I can start a company within 10 minutes online. I can do taxes. I did my taxes last year. I was in South Korea in 2 minutes from airport lounge online. I voted for the elections when I was in Tokyo online. I mean, it's just so easy that you don't even, we see, really seriously, we spend almost zero time on public kind of bureaucracy. And I think that is something that countries will have to think about also foreign. So in that sense, bringing in talent and how to make their experience great.
That's interesting.
I think if we have a minister of
User
user experience, it probably will rest within the Ministry of Tourism.
yeah.
It has to be economic. You have to tie in with the economic value of the country. Right. Okay. So, you have any more? Okay. So, yeah, I know. Yeah. So this is the last question before we let you go, right? So this is the usual question that we always ask our guests. So what is the one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Yeah, I know that very well, actually. So how short do you want me to say that? I think the biggest, for me, the biggest learning has been how to say no. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's so important. And when I started my first business, and I became so famous so fast, I suddenly discovered that I'm like 90% of the time I'm spending talking about what I'm doing instead of doing it. So really focusing and asking the question with like if I, as an entrepreneur or as somebody building a business, to really think, okay, I get a request. Does that help my business? Does it help my family? Does it help my health? If it doesn't, then I shouldn't do it. And a lot of people don't like me because I say no so much now. But definitely, we are wasting. We don't even notice how much time we waste because we are afraid to say no, or we don't want to disappoint other people. But if you don't do that, you're disappointing yourself. So I think, for me, that has been painful learning.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that's something that we also share with some of our freelancers. When we first started out, right, 5 years ago,
we say yes to everything.
Yeah, we seldom say no, right? Even like $100 job, which is probably may not worth it, but we will still say yes because
with hopes that the client will come back to us.
Oh, we are worried if we say no, the client will never come back again,
Yeah.
right? But then after doing it, then we realize that actually, it doesn't make sense. We should have said no because we couldn't put in 100% of our effort, right, to do something that we will be proud of, right? And yet at the same time, there's so much things that the client
Opportunity cost.
Expect
us to deliver, and of course plus the opportunity cost. So in the end, now we also find that this is very important. So we have to learn how to say no in a very nice way.
Exactly.
Asian way.
Yeah, Asian way. So one of I don't know whether it's proper for me to say that, but one of the way is, when we receive a job and then we find that actually it's not worth our effort. So what we did was we deliberately put a very high cost to it. So then the client will say, oh, no lah, too expensive, cannot, So hopefully then, it seems like they are the one who is rejecting us and not the other way around. So a very Asian way of doing, right?
If they would agree, then it would be worth the time, right?
Exactly. So that's just one of the technique that we have learned over the last 5 years to come up with this technique.
I think it's very clever. I mean, and I just, every time now, I'm saying no to big speaking engagements, but I just know that it's not going to help us. And every time you say no, right, it feels so good. Like, otherwise you just drag this. You said yes, now there's expectation. You cannot meet them. So it's just so much, and all that brain power that you save from being anxious, like you would be anxious about the thing. You can now use that on the things that you have to work on.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for your time. Thank you. So thank you for tuning in. Another episode for the Freelance Exchange. So subscribe to iTunes and leave a review.
So subscribe to our YouTube page and leave a comment because we want to hear what you think. Let us know the questions or the freelancer you want to hear from, and follow us at Creatives at Work on Facebook page and Instagram.
So join us next time for a brand new episode of Freelance Exchange. Until now, see you. Bye.